Chapter 2. On that day, I rang up Dr. Heim, a local village priest in the Catholic Church, and asked if I might have a talk with him. To my surprise, the friendly welcome in his voice had gone, and he replied, almost curtly, "If you meet me outside the coffee house in the market square in 1 hour's time, I can see you for a little while." Puzzled, I turned to my friends and said, "What is the matter with Dr. Heim, I wonder? He has not by any chance become a Nazi or anti-British or anything else, has he?" My friends, who are Protestants and belong to a neighboring confessional church, whose pastor has only recently been let out of prison, replied, "It was not very wise for you to phone. We should have warned you. You see, he is always in danger because he is so courageous. He is a wonderful man and an inspiration to all non-Nazis in this district. When he was in prison, he met some of our pastors, and since then they have often met secretly for prayer. Though Dr. Heim is an ardent Catholic, he never ceases to urge that all Christians must stand together against the forces of paganism. In fact, when he realized there would be trouble in a Lutheran church meeting in this neighborhood one evening, he remained near the church, and when the Gestapo rushed the meeting and tried to close it, Dr. Heim went in after them and challenged their right to interfere. It rather startled the young SS men, because they were acting without authority, and they knew that Dr. Heim had a big following in the town, which is largely Catholic. It must have been a strange sight, and would have made a good picture. An elderly Lutheran pastor and a small, humble congregation singing Luther's hymns, with a group of arrogant young Nazis shouting them down, and then this Catholic priest, with flaming passion, demanding of the Nazis what they wanted with their noise and their arms against a few old people saying their prayers. It was almost like a modern version of, "Or ye come out as against a thief with swords and with staves to take me." Was that why Dr. Heim went to prison, I asked. Well, that partly, but actually it was because he will never give the Hitler salute, and has never let the words, "Heil Hitler," pass his lips. And in the Catholic schools here, he has got the children and all the young people in the church inspired with the zeal of crusaders, so that they use the old German greeting of "Grüß Gott" to indicate their allegiance. Recently, a Gauleiter visited this Catholic school, and every time he shouted, "Heil Hitler!" the children shouted back, "Grüß Gott!" I left my friends and made for the coffee house. Presently, Dr. Heim and I talked for several hours in the countryside. He said, "I have now been forbidden to teach in the schools, though I can teach on Sunday in the church, but I expect that soon I shall not be allowed to preach. There arises therefore for me a terrible conflict, not, believe me, about the most courageous thing to do, but because we know now in the circumstances in which we find ourselves that it is imperative that we must show skill and strategy as well as courage if we are to meet the evil forces around us and not be defeated. Let me give you an example of what I mean, for I had rather a bitter experience last week. There was in this province a meeting of clergy and laymen to discuss a provincial Catholic paper. I felt we were not being nearly courageous enough, and got up and said that if the Catholic paper under discussion were run by those who had faith and courage, they would attack again and again the whole Nazi system as an evil which must be fought and overcome. The elderly owner of the paper replied and thanked me for the candor of my outburst, with which he said he had great sympathy, but that when he had given me the story of what happened, he hoped I'd tell him what was the courageous thing he should have done. He went on, "My paper has been suppressed on 5 occasions already, and if it is suppressed again, it will be permanently banned. Now, if we could get one edition out, and circulated to all Catholics in this province and others beyond who read it, stating emphatically and fully our case against the Nazis and urging relentless opposition, I would think it worth doing. In fact, the only possible thing to do, even though it meant imprisonment or even death. I can only ask you, Dr. Heim, to believe me when I say that. But the position is that there is now attached to my office a Nazi official who is always on the premises the night the paper is printed, and sees an advance copy, so that the paper would never get further than our office, and the attempt would mean a permanent ban. We have decided, not without great concern and difficulty, that we can help more by keeping in circulation a Catholic paper which takes care to state emphatically the Catholic faith, and hope thereby to strengthen the judgment of those who daily struggle to be faithful, and to prepare them for the day when other and greater opportunities for opposition arise. Will you tell me what we ought to have done? What is the right answer to our problem? I rose, said Dr. Heim, and replied, I do not know the right answer, but I apologize for charging you with cowardice. We sat in silence for some minutes, and then Dr. Heim spoke again. We don't know the answer. That is the heart of the tragedy. This enslavement is such that we have been taken unawares, and whereas it often seems easy enough to judge, it is only with agony that one makes any decision these days. You see, I cannot decide whether to insist on entering my school and preaching, thus giving the Nazis the excuse to arrest me, which is exactly what they want. I would fight them if we had arms, for it would be a more just war than I've ever known, but we are totally unarmed. If I accept their ban on teaching, other restrictions will follow, but so far I remain free to move among my people and visit them, and above all to give what help I can to the young who come for advice, as they in their turn face questions every day of the week that are as difficult as my own. In our present circumstances, to compromise at all is a dangerous path, and particularly so for the people to whom the young look for guidance. Should I withdraw? Nothing would suit the Nazis better than to lock up as many Catholic priests as possible. Therefore, at present, I have decided to remain free and to accept the negative restrictions, but to refuse outright to take any part at all in party ways, plans, or greetings. Later, I may decide I am wrong. I do not think we can be sure of the answer. I sometimes wonder what the martyrs of old would have done in these circumstances, for it does seem as though today individual martyrdom is not always the right way, and yet how careful we need to be, because we may be deceiving ourselves. Of course, our real guilt lies in our slowness and in letting these gangsters get the whole country in their grip sufficiently to paralyze all collective opposition. So many people were so relieved to see any kind of order emerge out of the uncertainty and chaos that they said, certain things the Nazis are doing are good, and left it at that, without inquiring on what this new order was based, or what was the spirit of the movement that was sweeping the land. May I tell you, I said, of some young Catholic students I met in Vienna who puzzled me because they called themselves Catholic Nazis, and who, it seemed, had formed a small fellowship in which each member had resolved to attend Mass every day for a year and to pray for the capture of the Nazi movement by the Catholic Church. When I asked them to explain what that meant, they said, well, you see, apart from any particular leaders or program, there has been let loose through this movement a great dynamic energy, and we are convinced that this need not all develop along Nazi party lines. We see this movement as a lusty pagan infant born in the midst of Europe, and we want it baptized into the church." "Yes, I know that movement," said Dr. Heim, "and many other young Catholics, as well as some of the younger members of the Protestant German Christian group who are in the party. It is tragic that there should be such confusion in the minds of those who should know better. Can you wonder that the Nazi movement has swept the younger generation off its feet? If so many young Christians can be so misled, they will find their error and pay bitterly for it, I fear. But I must not judge them harshly, because you realize that I too, in another sense, am confused and bewildered about the right action, even though I have no illusions, for this movement is of the devil. Of course, we cannot escape the fact that not only did we not fight soon enough, but we must now realize that this could not have happened in Germany if there had not been a fundamental lack of the deepest sanity, which is a belief in God. People have forgotten that this claim is final, and they are trying to find out whether they can fit God into another allegiance they have put in front of him. By the way, he added, I saw an English paper recently, and I was interested in its criticism of Christians here, saying how lacking in courage we must all be not to stand up to the Nazis better. Tell them we welcome their criticism. In fact, we share it, but tell them also that it's not so easy to judge sitting by an English fireside or in one of your lovely gardens. The conflict here is much deeper than they know. Tell them we know we were blind fools not to have fought earlier and before we were in chains, but that they should look for the writing on the wall in Europe and America as well as Germany. Tell them, above all, that many of us are not sure what is the right action, but that we wrestle day and night to find it, and let them know that in this little town there are old men and women, as well as quite young children, whose hearts beat faster with both faith and fear as they retort with courage to the Nazi bully who salutes them in the street. Gruß Gott. I must go back to church. It is Holy Week. Perhaps we may not meet again before the war, because there is, I believe, no hope of avoiding war with these men in power. But they will fall, and millions with them, and pray God that those who survive will have learned never again to allow the minds and spirits of men to be fettered.